thrilled to have you with us. I know we have several more rolling in here, but we'll let them get started here shortly. I just want to give you a few housekeeping notes. Your attendance checks will pop up right in the center of your screen, so keep an eye out for those. I do have it set up for 6 of those to come through in the hour. So hopefully we'll get at least 5 of them. So hopefully you'll see those. Allie and Guy, you will not see those. So just FYI, I will also put a note in the chat when those come through so that if you didn't see it, we can still get you your credit. If you have any technology issues throughout, please feel free to throw those in the chat as well, and I will help you as I can. But without further ado, I'm going to turn it over to Jim. Thanks, Jim.
Yeah, thank you, Tiffany. Appreciate it. Well, welcome everybody. We're so glad you're here. We appreciate you participating in this very nice topic about data. One of the things that near and dear to my heart and our group as well. Our topic today is beyond spreadsheets, automating data flow for more efficient accounting operations. And I think you'll find Allie and Guy and team to be very informative and teach us about, maybe there's something outside of a spreadsheet and how that works, and maybe what an API connection looks like as well. And we're very excited. And if you've got questions, please put them in the chat. We'll be monitoring those as well. We'll probably have a big Q&A session at the back end, but I'll be helping the team, so they've got a lot of content, and so we'll turn it over to Allie and Guy.
Thanks, Jim. Hey guys, thanks for having us, and thanks to everyone for coming. Just start out with a thanks to Jim and the tech user group for letting us speak today. As Jim mentioned, I'm Allie Vance with Cordona. This is my co-presenter and one of my partners in crime, Guy Bickle. As many of you have seen in the RSVP for today, we're going to speak a lot on integration methodologies. So I'm going to kick us off, tell you a little bit about who we are, and then we are going to get into the weeds pretty quick here. I would be remiss not to start off with a little bit about why we are fit to speak on this topic. So my company, Cordona, we are consultants. We create custom data solutions for clients. We focus on just data migrations, data integrations, and data warehousing solutions. We work with clients to execute these projects either as a standalone provider or sometimes with a consultant or a provider that has a specialization. Think about perhaps someone implementing Sage Intacct, and that's their specialty. We would work alongside them to connect Sage Intacct to other systems in their tech stack. You can think about us like movers. If you're getting a new house, we're going to make sure that your dishes stay in one piece and that they don't end up in your master bedroom. So across our team, we have an average of 15 years of technology consulting experience. I know both Guy and I have worked together in a past life in the Salesforce consulting world. So we also have a pretty deep expertise when it comes to CRM implementation and just general business process improvement. One of the things that is unique about Cordona, or that I think is unique about Cordona, is that we're system agnostic. There are consultancies out there that will focus on system A or system B or maybe system C and D. Our focus is not the system, but what we're doing with the system. We're working across business tools. Our focus is moving that data. So having an API for anyone in the room who's more on the technical side is certainly the ideal. But because moving data is our specialty, we have to address those problems sometimes when an API isn't available. So our goal is focus on movement of data, making sure that data gets to the right place and manipulating it however you need it to be formatted in that new place. Wherever that's happening, that's where we're going to be. So as I mentioned, I want to dive pretty quickly into the details of our main topic today, integrations. I'm curious if, by show of hands, if you guys are able to vote using the buttons in Zoom, how many people here are regularly working with an integration? That is, two different softwares passing data back and forth. I see at least one thumbs up.
That was me.
Normally you give me a thumbs down. This is great news. All right. So I see a few thumbs up. Great. So for those of you who haven't worked with integrated systems, there are a lot of benefits, probably enough that we could spend the entire hour just chatting about the benefits of having integrated systems across your tech stack. Data integrity, data accuracy, security, automation, time savings, et cetera, et cetera. But at its core, writing an integration is connecting two systems and helping make teams more efficient. That being said, there are options for integrations. And when we work with clients, one of the things that I like to speak about is thinking about data in a few different ways. The first is going to be the where. Think about this like your department, your sales, your HR, operations, IT. Each of those groups is going to have a separate system, perhaps a separate spreadsheet, maybe a separate process. How are they interacting with data and what data are they using? For your HR department, you may have a payroll system, you may have a time card entry system, you may have employee information, annual reviews. Customer service might have a CRM, they might have a spreadsheet that they consider to be the Bible. My point is every department is going to look a little bit different. They're going to interact with that data a little bit differently and different use cases. The other way to think about data is the what, and that is what is the format of the data? The easiest way for me to visualize this is first think of all the different business softwares that you're using. And if you were to export that, what that output looks like. And then on top of that, what type of files you could save in a SharePoint folder. All of those different file formats that you could just drop into a dumping ground of a folder, all different types of formats in which your data could take. We can dive down deeper into data formats and separate those data into two source formats, structured data and unstructured data. Structured formats are going to be the most likely be the output of your database or your software. That little download button in the upper right-hand corner, that's going to be the place most likely that you're going to get an Excel file or a CSV. If you are connecting to a system directly, you're going to access your database just from there. This data is going to be formatted consistently. It's going to be organized. It's likely going to be formatted in a widely acceptable way if it's an export of some sort. The formats of these structured data formats are relatively limited. Anything that you are going to see in this area is going to be easy to use, both from a system standpoint as well as a user standpoint, just because of the consistency in the organization. On the flip side, unstructured data is a little bit different. It is more likely to be less organized and have a whole bunch of different structures and formats. Think about something that is qualitative versus quantitative. Your unstructured data is going to take a whole bunch of different formats, JPEGs, images, Word files, social media posts, PDFs, email files, if you're saving an email from Outlook and copying and pasting it into there. All of these are different types of unstructured data formats. Because we have so many different options for an unstructured data format, you could guess, and you would probably be right, that this data is a lot harder to normalize, to organize, and use. So with that, I'm going to talk a little bit about integration models. So I have a lot of information that I'm going to cover on this slide. So Jim, I'm going to give you permission to interrupt me if I'm moving too quick, but I know you will.
Thank you.
So for anyone who's just dipping their toe into the world of integrations, one of the things I like to explain is that there's three main ways that you can structure your data connections. You have a point-to-point, a hub and spoke, and a data warehouse. More than likely, you've heard the term data warehouse get thrown around. You're probably a little bit less likely to have heard or spoken about the two other designs. A point-to-point is going to be the simplest of these three approaches. This is where we're just going to link two individual systems directly. The example I like to give, especially to a group like this, is linking a CRM with an accounting system. You don't want your sales team going and selling to someone who isn't paying you, and it would be great for your sales team to know that. But I'm also willing to bet that as CPAs, you would rather cut off a finger than give a sales team access to your accounting system. That's fair. I'll give you that. Better to give them that data, let them make their decision, and if you can show that to them without having an extra meeting, all the better. As you can see with the image on the left here, the downside to a point-to-point integration is that it can get really complicated really quickly. So one way that you might see this manifest is with a point-and-click tool or a connector. A lot of systems come with a built-in connector. It's an out-of-the-box. You set it up. When you have a lot of those, that ends up creating really a bowl of spaghetti over time. So while point-to-point integrations can be a great solution for smaller companies or where latency or speed of connection is of utmost prioritization, the solution can be pretty tough to scale and pretty tough to maintain. The second piece here is a hub and spoke model, which is exactly what it sounds like. It is a centralized place where all of the data flows through. Typically, we see that hub being an ERP or a CRM system. And this can be a really great solution for a small to medium-sized business, especially one that may not have enough data or enough desire to move to a full data warehouse structure. This is also something that works really well alongside a data warehouse. And it does make maintenance easier since everything is flowing through one place. But the downside to a hub and spoke model is you now have one point of failure. If something bottlenecks, that's where it's going to bottleneck. And the last model I want to talk about is a data warehouse or a data lake. Likely, this is the term that most of you guys have heard. A data warehouse or a data lake can take data from all sorts of different sources, transform that, and bring it into a centralized location. The term you're going to hear a lot with this type of process is ETL. That stands for extract, transform, and load. You can think about a data warehouse like a library where you have all the books in one spot. They're really well organized. For anyone over the age of, 35 or 40, there's a card catalog. You know how to find something. You can do your research. It's going to be effective. It's going to be quick. It's going to be easy. And this is the crux of the value of a data warehouse. It's research. It's analytics. Something that data warehouses and data lakes do really well is collecting that data, normalizing it, and putting it into a format where you can perform more powerful analytics. You can do predictive analytics. This is a wonderful platform on which to build AI capabilities and trend analysis. Data warehouses have the ability to take data at a point in time to give you that time series information that allows you to look at trends over the last year, 2 years, etc. One of the downsides to a data warehouse, though, is that you are adding a layer in your data architecture. So one of the downsides that I would consider in this particular structure is latency. If immediacy is something that you require, I would think about the overall design and how this fits into it, where that speed is needed. The last concept that I want to introduce before I pass the mic over to Guy is the idea of a source of truth. When you're working with data, especially across multiple systems, you need to be able to match this. This absolutely cannot be a situation where mom says no and dad says yes. There has to be a clear decision. It could be innocuous as misspelling a name in one system. This is coming from someone whose name has never once been spelled correctly. Or it could be something as serious as a tax ID or a client billing address. The idea of having a source of truth when you're thinking about connecting systems, think about where you would go to get information that you would be most likely to rely upon. Now that I've spoken a bit about the different models of how you can set up connections on your data, I'm going to pass it to Guy and have him go a bit deeper on how we can get these data connections in place.
Thanks, Allie. Hello, everyone. I'm Guy Bickle. I'm a certified nerd. I've got the Legos over one shoulder and the 3D printer over the other one. I've been working with data for 30 years. I'm pretty excited to jump into this and show you guys some of the different aspects. We're going to peel back that onion a little bit and get into some of the details of what Allie was speaking to. So first thing I'm going to jump into here is the common data connections that we see when we're integrating these systems and all those different solutions that Allie had presented. You've heard about terms of APIs, direct database connections, and even the files, being able to pull those into the systems. I'm going to jump into each one of these and we're going to talk about some of the different solutions, different tools that are available to us. And see if you guys have any questions. You're welcome to post those. I'm happy to try to answer those as we go, or I may defer some of the questions because I'm going to answer that in one of the upcoming slides. So the first thing we're going to talk about is the application programmer's interface. You hear about this as an API. I like to think of the analogy of an API as similar to a waiter when you go to a restaurant. When you sit down at a restaurant, you order a meal, and that waiter takes that order and goes back behind the doors. They do all their magic, and 15 minutes later, out comes a meal. And that's very similar to what an API does at the computer system level. It's kind of a gateway between the actual data that sits behind an application and your requesting application, and it handles a lot of the specifics around security, and most importantly, it's handling the business logic. We don't always know some of the business requirements behind those applications, or we don't want to know those business requirements necessarily. For instance, an ERP system, if I want to create an invoice, I want to pass that request off to the API and pass in the required elements that I have and the data I have, and let that system make sure that it applies all of its business rules. It's doing all of its data validation. It's applying some of the logic around how do I get that next invoice number. I don't have to know those specifics. Their system takes care of it. So those APIs are really important because it does provide us real-time access to data. Typically, we can use those APIs to query information out of the system, and we get up-to-the-date information. We can use it to update and create records. We can go back and forth and actually manipulate the data without actually touching the database layer, which is really important. It's highly scalable. This allows us to make many calls in a very quick succession, or even get bulk data back and forth depending on the capabilities of that API. And it's an industry standard. That's probably one of the most important things is these APIs all follow the same kind of communication protocols. They have the same data requirements, and they use the same data formats. You probably heard of the phrase JSON. It's JSON, stands for JavaScript Object Notation. And it's a format that allows you to prepare data, and that system already knows how to work with it because that's an industry standard. And XML is another really common one that's been around. We're starting to see less and less of those XML integrations. They've been replaced with the more modern JSON and REST APIs. There are some cons, though, to APIs you should be aware of. It requires some developer expertise. You have to know how to communicate with those APIs. If you are using some of the tools that I'll speak to coming up, there's still the different authentication methods, and you need to understand, am I connecting and getting a token that I'm going to have to manage? Am I using OAuth integration? So there's the security components that are also part of it. So you have to understand that. It can be a little complex sometimes to manage those as well. So there's definitely some pros and cons. One of the most common things that I've heard, and it's one of those items that you want to kind of get out there, is just because there's an API available doesn't mean you can do everything that you might be able to do in the system via their interface. The vendor controls what those API endpoints are and what those functionality and what you're allowed to do from the API side of things. So there could be limitations that you have to be aware of. One of the first things we do when someone says I have an API, I try to go get that documentation. Just because there's an API, I want to make sure that I've got the functionality that I need to be able to read and write to their system. That's really important. So the vendor controls those interface capabilities. You don't get to control it just because there's an API. So that's important to know. Last thing that you should be aware of, these cloud-based applications don't want one developer taking up all their resources. So they typically have governances as well. And those governances may state how many times you can hit their API within a certain time frame. How large of the data can you send up? Because the last thing you want to do as a vendor of a cloud-based solution is have the entire system and all your tenants have their performance drop because one developer wrote something wrong and got caught in an endless loop and it's just hitting their system. So they're going to have governances around that. And that's really important to understand because when you architect a solution or an integration, you need to be aware of those governances and be able to address it through throttling or using some of their batch APIs. So APIs are really powerful. It is our most preferred way of interfacing with data, especially if you're going to create or modify data, because we don't, again, have to worry about those business rules. It's very secure, it's scalable, but it does have those other things you need to be aware of. So those are really important. Now, these slides here, I'm not going to speak to these. I've already covered this. These slides that you're going to see, this is going to be part of the takeaway. So all of those things I just discussed, they're here. I'm going to skip past these slides as I go through them. I'm talking about the pretty picture slides. Just note that there is this information. That one slide didn't have all the pros and cons listed, but the following does. So now we're going to talk a little bit about some of the third-party integration software. ESB and iPaaS, these are terms you're going to hear. ESB is Enterprise Serial Bus, and iPaaS is Integration Provider as a Service. These are applications that typically are going to be hosted for you. It's a middleware that actually is going to facilitate the integration between all these different applications. And so I've got this iPaaS acting as this hub, and on the image you can see there's kind of like a checkbox. There's also a little clock. These integrations are things that you can have as a scheduled component, and they can run as frequently as every few seconds if you need that near real time. We've seen batching that happens several times an hour or even just once a day, just depending on the requirements. But it can also react. So if there is a application that performs a certain function, you can actually have your integration listen to that, hear it, and react to it, and actually fire off an integration. So there's a couple different ways to actually have those integrations perform. Some of the advantages around this is you do have that central tool. That's great. You have to learn one tool, and you can use this one tool for all your integrations. At a previous client of ours, they had 21 different systems. They used a product called MuleSoft, and they actually grabbed data from all these different systems and was able to get them all to communicate. Part of the, I don't say a downside, but a consideration is that was a full-time job for 3 people, 21 systems. That's all they did all day long was actually work on these integrations and kept them running and added new functionality and features. So when you get into these large customers with big enterprise requirements, these products will scale to that, but there is a level of complexity that goes up with that as well. But it can handle high volumes, it can handle these complex integrations, and you could train your teams to actually leverage that and use it yourself or somebody on your behalf. Some of the cons that I covered is you start taking those advantages and flip it as a con. That means you need to have an understanding of these tools. A lot of these are not just point and click tools. These are more of a development application where you're actually going to get the endpoints configured, and then you're going to write all the components to extract the data, transform it, and then load that data into another system. So those integrations are near real time, but it does require a level of skill to be able to manage those. Because we have that one central hub, I guess you could say there's a lot of the systems, there is that single point of failure. If you are using this as an iPaaS and you've got a contract with a company and your accounting team forgets to pay a bill and they turn it off, all of a sudden all your integration stop. So there is that relationship. You have that one single point that you have to manage and make sure that everything's working there. Um, and just because you have one of these iPaaS solutions doesn't mean that you're going to be able to communicate with every software out there. I mean, there's still those requirements and still those interface capabilities we were touching on. Does it have an API? Do we have access to the database if we need to extract data? I don't recommend writing or trying to read or update data in a database directly, but we can actually pull that information out. Will that iPaaS system handle all that? So definitely some of those things that we want to consider. Big names you're going to hear in this space, the enterprise side of things, MuleSoft and Boomi. Those are big applications at scale. You may have heard of those. There's some other applications a little bit smaller. I always think of these as those if this, then that kind of functionality. Zapier is a really common one. People like, I'll create a Zap. Those are very reactive. They're going to grab stuff, but not going to scale to that enterprise level. And because of the architecture and the way those are written, you don't want to have 20 Workato recipes or 30 Workato recipes trying to do one integration because they all are very granular in what they handle. So you'd end up spending a lot of time, but they're great for small integrations. So you're going to hear people talking about Zapier and some of the Workato, DB Sync. And then there's other tools, programmatic tools like Python. That is one of the top data tools that is used to connect to systems and leverage all of these capabilities. It's a very granular tool where you can get very specific on how you want it to work, what you want to do, leverage open source libraries, and host that on a system that actually can handle the scalability and security for you, such as like Azure or AWS. Those are really common capabilities. So that's everything that I've got on the third-party integrations. As I mentioned, here is some of those logos that I talked about and some of the solutions to facilitate the integrations there. Take a quick breath.
Hey, Guy, it looks like
Yes.
there's a question that I'm going to direct to you. What are the top tools and languages for accounting and finance teams? Python, SQL, R, DAX, etc.
Yeah, I see that. Thanks. When we're speaking with um, data, uh, Python is a very powerful tool from the analytics side. It's the number two programming language in the world behind JavaScript. It is used often for taking data and doing some analytics on it. We're going to talk about some analytics tools where Python is a script that you actually have to write a lot of those languages and understand some of those libraries. We use it to help move data. That's been a really powerful tool for us to be able to pull data out, use it as a transformation tool, load it somewhere else. And we're going to talk about some of the ETL tools coming up here in a bit, and I'll drill into that more then. When it comes to visualizing the data, there are other tools that we recommend and we've used for the visualization layer to be able to empower your users to take a look at a data set and visualize it the way they need to, or be able to filter on that. That's going to be easier to use one of the visualization tools like Power BI or Tableau. Those are really big players in that market. So those are definitely ones that we have. SQL is a powerful tool. It's an industry standard that's been around for, they created that industry standard back in 1992, that ANSI standard. You can write SQL to pull data and query data. We use that a lot, and it's not exclusive. We will use SQL to pull data via Python. So Python is acting as the conductor and grabbing data, but SQL is really the tool to pull data out of the system. So there's a lot of languages there, and I'm happy to try to demystify some of that. If I just made it more confusing, I apologize, but there it is a web of different technologies out there. We can drill into more of these too in a Q&A session here in a bit. So another type of integration tool are these applications. Ali touched on this. There are applications that are specific for an integration. There's a lot of pros and cons of this. One of the examples here, I'm going to flip this image over from an application to the cloud to show you. Here's an integration that's very common that we see. Salesforce, one of the largest business apps out there, and QuickBooks, very common with these small, medium-sized businesses. We see a lot of integrations with those. Easy use case for everybody to understand. And there's a lot of products that are specific for that integration. And the advantages to use is that these are pretty easy to set up. We're talking configuration time in measured in hours versus some of those other ones would be days or even weeks when you start talking about custom programming and using some of those really large iPaaS tools. They're very cost effective because they do one thing. They're very focused. It's not really a tool, it's a product that you're installing. And you're just connecting the two endpoints. And they have some basic configuration, maybe a couple checkboxes you can enable or disable, but the actual integration is pre-authored. So there's advantages to that. It is quick, it's easy, it's something typically an end user can do without having to bring in a developer. But the flip side to that is there's not that much customization capabilities. You kind of get what you get. Um, if you have a very complex integration with more needs, you're probably going to outgrow some of those integration and those connector apps pretty quickly. You're also applying or you are reliant on that application provider. So if there is a change to QuickBooks, they add a new feature and there's a new field, you need that application developer to update the logic and then deploy that. So there's a little bit of behind the curtain functionality. You can't get behind there, you can't work on it. So you're relying on it. But it is a quick way to get applications integrating and speaking back and forth. So we see those as well as things that are typically scheduled or reactive to an environment. So connector apps also pretty powerful and good to have around. Again, here's some of those slides that you can take. And now kind of starting to wrap up as we start talking about some of the file-based connections. I spoke to these in that priority of functionality. We like to see APIs. That's the most flexible that we can have. Then we can actually do some application-specific integrations. The last piece is file-based connections. That's the lowest common denominator that we'll see, where somebody can provide you a CSV file. I've got a CSV file. We're going to leverage the application import utility that might be part of the consuming product. A lot of applications out there have the ability to import data, and you're going to most likely see that CSV, that comma separated file. Those are those text-based files that every application, including Excel, can read and write. Very easy to use. Those applications typically have the way to export the data as well. And that could be in the format of Excel, or it could be a CSV output. Even though that's the lowest common denominator, the pros on it, it's free. You can actually have those applications handle it, but the format of the file is going to be dependent on the application. A lot of those applications are going to have a very specific format. And if you've worked with clients before where they hand you a spreadsheet, data can be all over the place. The data is not prepared yet. You have to prepare the data. You're not going to get that as part of this import. That CSV file has to be prepped ahead of time. So those are definitely some of the cons. There's volume and timing issues. These import utilities are things that the user's got to click on and pull in data. I don't typically see many apps that can handle the scheduled import of CSV files. It is something that the user has to go click, find the file, tell it to run, make sure all the data is right. And if there's errors, they have to go address it, fix the data, and run it again. So you lack some of that real-time integration capabilities. It is great for really quick updates or small batches, but I don't think I'd recommend it for an ongoing integration unless that is the only way you can get data in and out. CPAs, there's applications out there. Sage 300 is one that we've recently been working with, and they've got some limitations. It's an older app, it's been around for a long time. Although they have created this web API layer, not everybody has it. And so integrating with those applications require their import utility to be used. Now, there's security risks. The data itself is sitting out there floating around. So there's a lot of reasons that we use this as a last resort. But the fact that it exists is something to at least mention because there is a way of getting data in and out of those systems that should be covered. And now, whoa, hold on. I got all excited there. Double click. The data warehouses and data lakes. We mentioned that earlier. This is kind of going back to the question of getting data in and how do you analyze it and visualize it. Those data warehouses are designed and optimized to store massive amounts of data. It's pre-aggregating the data and the information that you provided so you can do analysis against your data and it responds extremely quick. So an example is you may have 20 years of sales history and you want to have somebody be able to visualize that data. I want to see a sales analysis by year, by department, and have it regional. And you can do that and the system responds. And as soon as you start flipping those parameters, within a second or two, you've got a nice visualization. And that's because the data warehouse is written specifically to store massive amounts of data like that and be able to react to it and be able to visualize that for your users. A lot of advantages to this is that you can enable the users. That could be a C-level person who doesn't typically get into the applications, but they want to be able to do some of their own quick analysis. They want to be able to slice and dice their data and take a look at data over time and do a quick trend analysis. It empowers your users across all skill sets to be able to take a look at that data. The setting up of the warehouses can be a little bit of complexity. There's some thought that has to go into it. You have to understand, what are the metrics and what are all the different analytics that are going to be performed because you have to obviously have that data in the system for them to be able to do it. So there is a bit of thought. You're not going to load every aspect of data. You're going to take in and bring in the information that's most important. Alan mentioned this earlier. Data warehouses are typically not real time. This is something that we see most of the time a nightly upload because it's grabbing data, massive amounts of data, and putting it into a warehouse, and then it has to crunch on that. We see that happening in the evening. So your team is usually looking at data that's a day old. But we have seen some scenarios where every 4 hours the data gets updated, and that requires again more complexities in how you ship that information into the warehouse and how it handles it. So it definitely requires a lot of planning, but the plus side on it, it's a very powerful tool. And I don't see enough organizations that leverage this. They are just dependent on really old tools of grabbing very tabular data and running reports. And sometimes, they're throwing it into Excel and using a pivot table. Not a terrible solution, but man, there's way more powerful tools to be able to visualize that and get more information. So data warehouses and data lakes are becoming more and more prevalent in the systems and what we're seeing customers moving towards. If a customer has some needs around that, we're absolutely happy to help demystify some of those components there. So here's those pros and cons that I just mentioned. And now we're going to take a look, and this is some of the last pieces I have. we talked about the ETL tools, those extract, transform, and load processes. In that data warehousing image, it's that one box here that I've got circled. Um, these ETL tools are very purpose built. They are designed to move a lot of data very quickly across systems. Unlike the iPaaS tools, which are very built for transactional data, I'm going to bring over information through an API. I'm going to grab that data. These ETL tools are really designed around moving gigabytes and terabytes of data and petabytes of data, massive amounts of information back and forth, depending on the systems and the capabilities. But they're very purpose built for high volume. A lot of these tools out there have third-party libraries that are available to simplify and be able to use that information across different connectors and different organizations. And the ability to transform that data as it comes in is going to create consistency across the organizations. You may have some systems that record transactions in the local time zone. You have other ones that use UTC data, and you may have to transform that information so we're all looking at data in the same time block. And that's going to be really important there. So some of these popular tools you may have heard about is Microsoft's SSIS. That's part of that Microsoft technology stack. That is the core behind their ETL tool to pull it around. It's been around forever. Informatica, that's another big tool. Actually, they were just in the news 2 days ago. They got acquired by Salesforce. It was an $8 billion, that's a billion with a B, acquisition on this tool. So when you see these large organizations making these massive investments, it's really highlighting the importance that they see around data. We're investing to be able to have a tool to be able to move that data in and out of our clouds and our systems, and we want to be able to provide that to the system. So Informatica just got purchased, but they are another really big tool out there. Fivetran is one that you see a lot when working with Snowflake as one of the endpoints. So great tools. Con side of it, there's definitely complexity. You have to understand these tools. You have to understand how to connect and use the tools to transform that data. So there's that investment in understanding those tools. And there's also ongoing integration and maintenance. If you are using something like SSIS, you are using a local tool. You're not using a cloud-based tool unless you are looking at the Azure products. So definitely some components there to consider as you go through that. So here is the pros and cons there that we'll leave with you in that slide deck. And now I'm going to pass this back to Allie in the wrapping this up. Allie, you're muted. Or was I going to speak to this?
No, I'm here.
Okay, cool. I just want to make sure.
Well, I'm going to bring this back up to the 30,000 foot view. I know Guy was like not even down in the weeds. He was like at the roots here. But as Guy mentioned, we have a lot of the takeaways that we've talked about written in the slides that we're going to distribute. Our goal today was to give everyone who's attending an overview of the options and tools that you have available to you when you are connecting your software. We also wanted to cover some key benefits and risks that you need to consider, either heavily consider or lightly consider, depending on your organization's decision-making process, if you decide to embark on a project of this ilk. And the last thing that I'd like to leave the group with is a couple of tools for planning for these types of projects. So I will say this is an area that we are planning to cover more heavily at the Peak conference in November. So if you haven't registered, I would recommend you take a peek, maybe reach out to Jim, have him give you some more information on it. I know he has some really great speakers lined up over that conference. So this is just a brief piece of this, but on the next few slides, what I'm going to share is a few models and tools for your considerations that you can apply to your own organization and hopefully help assist you to figure out where you stand and begin the planning process if a data-focused project is of interest. The first model that I want to share is a data maturity model. The crux of this is just to emphasize that this type of work, it takes time. You are not going to go from 0 to 60 in a matter of months. This is a journey, and thinking about where you are in this journey is going to be really helpful to help identify those incremental steps. One of the questions that we as a consulting company in this world get more often than anything is like, how do I use AI? That's a great question. Tell me how your data is structured. And someone sends me a spreadsheet that's saved on Bob's desktop. And I'm like, it's going to be a bit before we get to AI. So think about where you stand in this model. And the goal is just to establish realistic expectations of where you sit here, and then help define those next steps. The next tool that I wanted to share is a source data inventory tool. This is a really great exercise when you start thinking about connecting your data across not just your departments, but across your entire organization. This is something that I would envision you taking the headers, drop it in an Excel sheet, and collaborate with your team. The goal here is to uncover those unique sources that you may not know about, or how data is getting used in other areas of the organization that might never have crossed your mind in Department B or Department C. Work with your team. Do some collaboration. You might find something new. You might find that someone is using your data in a way that you have never intended. So that this is just to help guide you, to help give some thought to this. And if you find out that someone is using your data, how are they using it? How is it helpful for them? How could you make it easier for them? And the last piece of the tool puzzle I'm going to throw out at everyone before we wrap for the day is reviewing the data sources themselves. We have some questions for you to ask around each of the data sources that you may have identified in that previous tool. The quality of your data is going to directly affect the quality of your reporting, your predictive analytics, any applications of AI that you choose to implement within your company. So take a look at your source data in relation to this framework. This may immediately lead to some improvements. It may say, oh gosh, Jim is only capturing 3 of the 6 data points we need, but he has all the tools to capture them. Let's start now. You can start building a more robust, complete, and trusted information set for your future, and decide which of those missteps is going to be a critical misstep and which of those misses might just be a little bit of a stumble and it's not going to be critical for your organization. So with that, I had promised Jim that I would leave 10 to 12 minutes at the end of our presentation for Q&A. So Jim, with that, can go ahead and pass to you for questions and answers.
It looks like Anna Rogers got a question in the chat there. Do you see that there?
Oh, I just saw that come in. What is your recommendation for the governance of stored procedures? Should stored procedures follow the same change management controls as regular code or configuration changes?
I will be happy to jump in on that. And I would say yes. I would consider things within the database, such as a stored procedure or a SQL view. I would consider that just like I would any other code component. We will leverage Git or GitHub to check in code. I would follow the same process in a development cycle too. You don't want to go into a production system and update and start fiddling with a stored procedure. You're going to want to do that in a staging area, ensure that the changes are good, and then promote those changes up into a system. So I do consider those database components like that, functions, stored procedures, views. I separate that from the data itself. And those scripts are things that I would check into a source control. Start speaking to some of the concepts of data living in a space and having those stored procedures that are going to access that. You can do that many different ways, but I definitely recommend that you do treat that as code. Don't try to check in the data. That's going to blow up your source control, but the scripts are going to be really important. So hopefully that answers the question. If there's a specific use case you need to clarify, let me know, Anna.
Perfect. Thanks, Guy. Any other questions at all? Surely there's got to be a question. So I'll jump in here. So if I'm a participant in this meeting, and what are some use cases that you guys usually see for I'm a CPA, I'm living in spreadsheets, and I'm working in some systems, and what should I be thinking about? I mean, when should I think about doing some integration, thinking about managing my data, those kind of things? What's a typical scenario as a CPA we should think about?
I think one of the easiest things, and this is a guyism, so the fact that I'm the one saying it is a little bit entertaining. But one of my favorite things that I hear Guy say when we're working on projects is, where are the spreadsheets? Seek and destroy. If there is a spreadsheet somewhere that you are manipulating, that's a great place to start. Where did the data in that spreadsheet come from, and how are you manipulating it? Is it something that you're doing on a regular basis? Is that something that could be automated to make your life as a CPA easier?
Mhm.
One example that I would kind of throw out there as an actual use case is, we're working with a manufacturing company. They have they have an ERP that's separate, and they are entering time in two different places. And their poor accountant will download from their timekeeping system for the folks who are working on the floor, and then she enters it into a different system. And every Friday for 2.5 hours, she keys in time entries and applies
Right,
project numbers to those time entries. That's something that's a really easy lift for 2.5 hours of her life to come back to her every week.
right.
Guy, I don't know if you have any other, use case examples that you want to throw in there.
No, I think that's a really good starting place. The silos of information is kind of what you want to eliminate. Is when somebody has something and that spreadsheet example exists on their local machine or even up in a common place like SharePoint, is everybody using it, or do they have their own copies? And all of a sudden, you start to realize that people are making business decisions off of different data sets, and that's very dangerous. You really want to have that one source of truth, and that goes back to that source of truth conversation. And that's why we like to identify those. Is there a place where this can all live? And is that something we integrate, or we do a data conversion process and everybody start using one common tool? So there's good things to think about there from that side. Jim, another example too is the reporting side.
Yeah.
That's another easy question is, are you getting the data out of your systems that you really want, or are you piecemealing it from 3 or 4 systems and copying and pasting charts and then throw them in a PowerPoint presentation for your C-level team? There's probably better ways to have a consolidated reporting tool or a warehouse or a BI tool to be able to show that information. So those are really some good examples. Where are you storing the data? How are you reporting off of it? That's that low-hanging fruit.
Yeah, I think in accountants, so what we do all the time is we download data from whatever system, right?
Hmm.
We're going to throw it in a spreadsheet and we're going to manipulate this thing. We're going to pivot this thing. We're going to do whatever we got to do. And so, I think if you talk about attacking spreadsheets, I maybe as accountants we can think about we're no longer going to necessarily download, but maybe there's another way to get to where I want it to be. Maybe it's taken directly from your QuickBooks or ERP system into kind of a Power BI area, and get the direct integration and bypass all the manual work that's done between downloading, manipulating, and then trying to figure out how yet again to report and then put that in a PowerPoint slide, right? So it's that kind of thing as well that I usually see as I always look at that as an opportunity. Every time I think about I'm going to download something, is there a better way? Is there a better way to get it and report it than what I'm doing today? So
Hmm. I would say
I
with the
would
C.
add one more thing to that is emailing. I remember really early in my career, there was a spreadsheet that I would get from this guy on the first day of every month, and then I needed to take that spreadsheet and manipulate it.
Mhm.
Something like that you don't necessarily think about it when you're in it. You're like, ah, yes, it's part of my monthly tasks. It's part of my, quarter end tasks. I'm going to send this out and check the box. What's happening to that data after I send it? How is it being used?
Mhm.
Um, because I was the end recipient, I was the one manipulating that. It could have been three steps less had we figured out how to get me the data earlier in the process.
Yeah. Then talking about like overall workflow, I'm sure you guys have clients that come to you and say, we have a disjointed workflow of all of our processes for accounting or HR or whatever it is, right? And maybe talk about some ideas for our trusted accountants here about how do you attack workflows? How do you automate and streamline things by managing your data? You have ideas on that?
Do you want to, Guy, are you still there? Did you
I
freeze?
know I'm here. I was
Oh,
going to let you address that.
so
Sorry.
Jim, your question is like, how do you attack the workflow piece of the
Yeah,
Jim?
because you're trying to move data along, right? You're trying to move
Yeah.
from system to system, and you're trying to get things from, kind of move things along in the kind of the accounting cycle or
Yeah.
whatever you're doing, right? You're moving data along. Maybe it's using integration and the different things that you do to manage your workflows of data. You manage your data and your workflows. How does it go from one point to the next, and where does it go? That kind of thing.
Yeah, I find whiteboarding sessions to be really helpful with that. Working through that with clients and getting together in person can be really helpful.
Mhm.
Putting it up on a board and figuring out like what's your current state and where are some of the bottlenecks? Where are some of the things that you could optimize? And then not only using the integrations to take away three steps, but then thinking a few steps ahead of that. And how can I use this integration to automate some of the middly complex tasks? Invoicing. Can I process all of my invoices at once and get them in one spot to review before they go out? Yes, I can. Can I get approvals from managers on time cards in an expedited fashion, or do I need to review those individually? But thinking about the steps in the process, not just from moving the data, but what's happening with it after. I, my recommendation is to really plot that out step by step. Um, there's a concept of talking about like six whys, and you ask six times. It's what are you doing? Okay, why are you doing it? Why are you doing that? Tell me more. Like, and you ask six levels deeper to really get to the root of the cause. So yeah, I sent the spreadsheet to Jim, but why? Why did I send the spreadsheet to Jim? He asked for it. Okay, why did he ask for it? And trying to get to the root cause of each of those steps so that you can take this and leverage it up for the efficiency piece. I'm not sure if that answered your question though.
Sure. No, how do you solve those hours and hours of trying to move things along, right? How do I manage my data? How do I get my data? And then the steps, right? I get to this, I stop here, and then now I've got to do something else. So no, that's super good.
Yeah,
And
that inventory tool is part of that analysis of understanding it and going through that business process review of understanding how users are grabbing that data. And we had a recent conversation where one of the integration points is a journal entry that the accountant uses at the end of the month. And I was like, well, tell me more about it. It's a two-line journal entry. I'm like, that's we're not going to automate a two-line journal entry. Of course, that seems like a silly waste of money. If that makes sense. But the other entries where you are putting in hundreds of lines of entries,
yeah,
man, that talk about uh, potential data king issues and having to go find out why your journal entry isn't balanced. What a nightmare. That's a great use case where we could automate that through those different processes. So we do try to find those pain points. Let's identify where you're having accuracy, where you're spending too much time. Is the data dated? Those are the kinds of things we want to prioritize and knock those out, and then drop into the other ones.
gotcha. So how do I get started? I'm on this call and I've heard about this. Seems intriguing to me, right? How do I get started by thinking about how do I incorporate this technology and integration and APIs and some of the things you've talked about, today's ETLs? How do I get started? What's my first step?
Uh, your first step should be to identify the stakeholders this is going to affect and start getting them on board. Having buy-in for a project like this across a lot of different areas of the organization is going to be one of the key determining factors to having success in getting this implemented. Having that feedback not only at the beginning and the buy-in at the beginning, but having people give feedback throughout the process and having some skin in the game, you are going to be so much more likely to be successful in getting this done. So start building a case. And the easiest way to build that case is figuring out the pain points of those other stakeholders. Uh, the other thing is that was a great place to start is that inventory of your data. Take a peek at what you have, where you have it, who owns it, and how it's used.
Yep. Great advice. Thank you. Okay. Guy, anything? We got about a minute and a half left. Any words of wisdom from your side?
Man, nothing that I don't think we've already touched on. I appreciate the time and everybody jumping in here because it is a really big topic and you could get very granular and spend a lot of time on each one of these things. So to get that half hour to talk about a topic like this is a little could be a little confusing for people. So please feel free to reach out to if there's anything or a specific use case you want to speak to. We're happy to spend some time and just understand, what's happening. And I did want to add, especially from the CPA side, the systems and the ERPs that we work with a lot are those cloud-based ones, NetSuite, Intact, QBO, Zero. Those are the top ones that I can think of. Those are great tools to work with. They all have those APIs, so it's really easy to interface with those and do some additional reporting and data warehousing out of them. So,
Exactly. That's where I would start. I'd look at my own ERP and I'd figure out how do I make it better,
yep.
right? My own accounting system or whatever I'm working on. So great. All right. Well,
Well,
we're just about out of time. Anything else, Allie?
no, thank you guys so much for having us. Like Guy said, if you have any questions, I have an email dropped in here, reach out. You'll probably end up getting me on the other end of things. So if you'd prefer Guy, I question your judgment, but we can make that happen.
Well, thank you very much. Appreciate it. With the group thanks you and Colorado Society thanks you. Appreciate
Thanks
it
so
very
much.
much.
Great. Thanks, guys.
Bye
Okay.
bye.
Take care.